that possession is 9/10 of the law. Unfortunately, it's your furniture, but he possesses it. And you're probably right. He's probably going out of business, and they'll sell off your furniture. And I literally sat on the floor and cried.
I would have too. I would tell you. I probably would have bawled my eyes out.
I did. Well, my brother-in-law, who was sort of a crusty old guy, and he said, "Oh, he got your caller ID." And my brother-in-law owned a print shop, so he said, "Let me call him." And of course, he called him, and it came through as his print shop, and the contractor answered. And to this day, I have no idea what he said to him. But the next day, I was on the way to get my furniture.
And then what did you do with it? Put it in a different storage unit?
Right. Then the insurance company said, rent a storage unit close to your home and just transport it. So that was really kind of by this time, so here we were at Christmas time, and now I had to start all over again. Now that I had my furniture, and now I could start to look for another builder, but I would have to start all over again.
Got you marked where we started.
Okay. Well, Betty, you certainly learned a lot about yourself and how to effectively handle stress, and that's a big subject on our Living Regret-Free shows. So what did you learn mostly about yourself that you didn't know you had either the skills or the capacity to do?
Well, certainly I learned that I have more resiliency than I thought I did. Definitely learned that I have the ability to be resourceful and to be very decisive. I think focusing was something that I didn't really recognize, that I had a real good ability to kind of focus in. While I was at my client's house, her husband was a retired admiral. He had actually started the Top Gun program. And when I got off the phone, I just kind of went from call to call to call to call. And at one point when I got off the phone, he said to me, "You would have made a good fighter pilot." And I was like, "Really?"
That's the best line. You really need to start off a presentation with that. You would have made a great fighter pilot.
Well, it's not exactly something that, somebody like me would expect to hear. But he said, well, when this all happened, it's like you could tell the shock. And then he said, you just focused in and just started going boom, 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 boom. I could call this one, I could call this one. Okay, then maybe I can do this and I can try this. And he said, that's what a fighter pilot does. He says, they just focus in and take action.
Well, you just reminded me, I had the same thing happen to me. I didn't realize it until you just said that. I had a home over on Marco Island on the west coast of Florida, and a car ran into the garage, and of course nobody was there, and I had to, I was on the road, but it was strange because my husband was a contractor, but I ended up doing everything, and I had to get in touch with the insurance company and the contractors and so forth and so on. And fortunately, it was a lot easier situation than what you went through, but it's true. I did that all while I was on the road, and there was no cell phones then either. So it was very interesting how I had to do that. But you're right. We turn into fighter pilots. Maybe that's why they say women are the stronger sex. I don't know. But so
right.
What are you share 12 tips that you use for dealing with stress. So tell us a few of your favorites.
Well, I think one of them is we create our own joy. It was, as I told you, the day before Christmas Eve when all that happened. And then during Christmas, I drove to my house one day. It was dusk. It was beginning to be dark. And I picked up my mail. And as I drove out of my block, I live on a cul-de-sac, and as I drove out, I noticed everybody had all of their holiday lighting on and everything, and it just made me so sad because here it was this joyful time of year, and I was stuck in this apartment. I had no, I had no holiday decorations or anything, and I cried all the way home. I cried. Well, the next morning I woke up, and it's sort of like that independence came back, and I went, doggone it, it's going to be Christmas. And I went to a Tuesday morning because I figured I could find things pretty cheap there. And I found these darling little holiday Christmas-type dishes, and they were very inexpensive. And then I found little Santa Claus napkin rings, and I found some plaid napkins. So I went home and set my table, and that became my holiday decoration. And then that night, ironically, my son and his wife rang the doorbell, and they brought me this tiny little false Christmas tree. And so I had Christmas, sort of like you have to make your own joy.
Right, that's true. But
I think one of the others is my tip number 9 is, that it's kind of like Rosanna was right. The lady from Saturday Night Live, she said it's always something, so you have to stay optimistic like my dad. And sure enough, once this whole trauma thing, 10 months later, I had moved back into the home and just getting back to normal life, and my mother passed away. And so I had to fly to Florida to be with my dad and help him with things. And on one of the trips after the funeral, I was clearing things out and, kind of helping him to get settled. And he had said to me, Dad always loved Buicks. All his life he bought Buicks. And he generally bought the LeSabre. And in his garage was sitting this Regal, which is a smaller car. And he said to me, I really wish I would have bought a LeSabre. And I said, well, why didn't you? And he said, well, at my age, he was 91 at the time, that at my age, the dealer thought that the smaller car would be better for me. But I really wish I would have bought a LeSabre. So I said, well, Dad, at your age, just that. But it came with a 3-year bumper-to-bumper warranty, and if I keep it one more year, I'll get a new 3-year bumper-to-bumper warranty. I was thinking, he's 91 years old. He'd be 92 by the time he traded it in, 93, 94, 95, so he's just thinking he's going to live forever. And I thought, well, boy, that is optimism. So I think you got to have optimism like my dad. By the way, he lived to age 97.
Well, see, he knew what he was talking about. Well,
right.
You've got this book, and not many people will have your experience. So why do you think that your book will be helpful to them, and how can they get it?
Well, here's the reality. No, not many people will actually have a plane land in their house. But I use it as a metaphor, Gail, because in essence, we all have planes in our houses. They just come in different forms. They come in the loss of a job, the loss of a loved one, a health issue, and just any sundry of things that cause stress in our life. So I'm just hoping that people will be able to benefit from the 12 things that I feel really helped me get through that time, and that they can look at that as their own plane, and that if any of those steps are helpful to them, maybe they'll be, see, I always say now when things get really stressful, I go, well, it's not a plane.
That's right.
So,
well, it's a quick
read. So
it
puts everything in perspective.
It's a quick read. So tell our listeners how they can get a hold of it.
It's on Amazon, so they can pick it up on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com, and it's available in softbound or in ebook. And it's only 38 pages, so trust me, you can get through it real quick.
And how can people get a hold of you, Betty? How can they reach you?
My email is Betty, and that's Betty with an E, B-T-T-E, at PriceGroupLeadership.com.
And that is your website as well, correct?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure all of you who are listening have never had a plane go through your house. Maybe some of you have had a car go through your house like I did. But the interesting point is we all get through these things. I know it sounds awful, but we do get through these things, and we do seem to find our strength where we didn't know we had it. So if you get Betty's book, her tips will be very valuable to you when you think all is lost and how can I endure any bit more. This is all going to help you very much. So, is there anything else that you would like to leave our listeners with, Betty? We've got about a minute left for you to give them words of wisdom.
Well, I think the only other thing I would say that it's certainly important to keep a sense of humor. Sometimes I feel because of business and all, that sometimes I think I'm a pretty serious person, but humor really does help a lot. When I got home and found all this, I had a friend who had previously been a journalist, like I had been a newspaper journalist, and she called and said, remember that plane was carrying New York Times? So she called me and said, well, I guess she'll do anything to get the New York Times delivered to your front door.
That's really true. That's a great remembrance. That's right. Well,
yeah.
Those of you who have been listening to Betty, Betty is also a friend of mine. I've known her for a long time. This is a real tragedy that she went through. It took a lot of perseverance. So get her book. It's called Help. I just love the title. Help, there's a plane in my house. So go to Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble, find it, enjoy it, and get to know Betty. She's a great person. And I want to thank you so much for being with us today, Betty. It was a wonderful, wonderful remembrance of what you had gone through and the kind of person I know you are. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Gail.